foliage.
Ooh,
Are you ready to tackle this?
Well, I'm actually going to go after it with soft pastels.
Ooh,
so I'm
that
in the mood
sounds
to make a
lovely.
mess. Yeah,
Wow.
I just haven't. But question, I'm going to use this tone paper.
Mm-hmm.
Should I tape it like you do with a painting? Should I just smear or let it go?
I think that depends on what type of edges you want at the end. If you like the idea of having a clean edge around everything, I would tape it. If you like the idea of your edges kind of being soft and sort of fading out, then I wouldn't tape it.
Yeah, I think I'll tape it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I like clean edges usually, but today I decided I'm not going to tape. I'm gonna be a rebel today.
Yeah.
I did. So actually, I pulled a couple internet paintings. They're not. I just honestly went to Google, but I was gonna share these really quick because the thing with like fall foliage is I feel like, and I'm sure you are all aware, there's so many ways you could approach it. So I just pulled up some ones I thought that were kind of nice. I thought this was kind of a nice take with like the layers that we're seeing. And sort of like down in here, things kind of tend to like blur together a little bit at the distance, and we're seeing a little, a few more crisp pieces. I mean, they're not hyper super crisp, but no, maybe a little bit more so in the front. I like the way these branches were executed. It kind of reminded me of maybe Bob Ross a little bit, like maybe the trunks were put in first, then some of the leaves, and then taking a skinny little brush, dip in water so you've got smooth little edges, and then kind of bringing out some more branches. So I kind of, when I look at paintings, I try to think, okay, what order did they maybe paint in? Did they kind of go back and forth a little bit? I try to think about the technique a little bit of how maybe they would execute it. And of course, you don't know completely. You'll never really know because you can't talk to this person. But, I try to just look at some of the different things. Let's see. Here's another one. Oh, this one's really... Wow. Looks kind of blurred on the screen a little bit, but I like how soft it is, and I like the way the artist executed the fact that a lot of these leaves are the same color. If you're walking through or looking at a group of the same kind of trees, it's like you get that. You don't have one tree that's red, one that's yellow, one that's orange. It's like, okay, these all kind of have that yellowish sort of tone. So to me, it's interesting to look at this and look at the lights and the darks and still see how depth is created, but all the tones are so similar. And then this one too, again, sorry, it's a little blurry, and this has a bunch of writing over the top. But again, I tried to find something similar-ish to the photo that I picked, in the fact that there's a lot of leaves, a lot of foliage, a lot of layers, and you're seeing these little tree trunks and branches kind of throughout. So that, when I Googled, that's why I picked these ones. But certainly there's a whole bunch out there of different things. So yeah, sometimes I think it's nice to just like look at different things and be like, okay, what do I like the look of? Maybe what would I sort of want to try to create? Because obviously when we're using a photo, this is a photo. So when we make a painting, or like Susan is doing her pastels, a drawing, or an artistic interpretation of this, it's like, then, I could make this my own, or stylize it, or express it in some different way. So that's kind of why I just wanted to start with that. And looking at that, and this type of painting to me is a painting I would maybe not sketch first, where I normally draw most of my paintings before I paint. That's like my process. I do that. Some artists don't. I just like to, but this to me seems like, okay, what would I draw here? Right? Like if you look at this,
yes.
I mean, sure, I could draw like a loose maybe outline, if that would be helpful to just know, okay, these colors are contained here, 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 to kind of separate. I could do that, but to me, that just seems kind of silly. I'm not going to. I'm going to approach this a little bit differently today. So I do have just canvas paper here, and some palette paper. I do have a pencil sitting here, but I'm just not going to use it, so I'm going to put it to the side. I do have a sponge. I don't know if I'll use it or not yet, but maybe. And then, of course, tons of different paintbrushes. As far as colors go, I didn't necessarily like give a specific list of colors because my kind of thought process was maybe gather any types of like reds you have, different, like a yellow ochre, a darker yellow. I've got like a lemon yellow, and these are all I'm just mixing and matching my brands today. I'll show you, I've got like this tub of paint, right? And I'll just pull colors from this tub. They're all mix and match. I'm not using one particular brand today. That's kind of what I do sometimes. I'll just throw paint into this big bucket. So yeah, and then maybe some brown, some burnt umber for those branches in there. Some green. This is a permanent deep light green. So I just kind of look at the image, pull some colors, make myself a little palette. I do have some white as well. We'll want some white and some blue for that sky. And as always, you know, I think you ladies are all really good at this, but, you know, feel free to venture off in your own pathway if you feel like you're onto something, you know, don't feel like you need to follow with me exactly, but I am going to walk you through how I would approach this, but by all means, do your own thing too. So I think that's awesome. I just want to make sure I've got all the colors I think I'm going to want. I don't want this particular red. Okay, so I've got I've got the Alzarian Crimson, and then I've got like a brighter red. And if you have questions on colors or like what I'm using or anything, like just let me know. So I'm going to start by making a sky in the back. And I'm not going to worry about washing my paper first today. I know typically we do wash our paper, but I'm not going to today. I'm going to let my sky kind of take over as a wash a little bit. So I'm going to mix the sky color. I'm going to start with some white. Scoop some white onto my palette paper. Probably way more than I actually need, but it's okay. And then a little bit of blue. And then I'm going to make, now notice the sky too, we do see a gradient happening. It's darker up here and lighter down here. Mm-hmm. So when we're mixing color, think about that a little bit, that you might want a little bit of a range of colors. And this is an ultramarine blue that I'm using, but you could use primary blue, you know, whatever blue you've got that you like. So, and then I start by taking kind of some white and then taking a touch of that blue and bringing it into the white. And to me, that looks pretty good for maybe like through here. And then a little bit lighter for over here and a little bit darker for over here. So maybe I take one little spot and add just a little bit more blue in it. And of course, it's not like I have to make it exact either. Certainly do not need to do that. And I'm putting just a little, I've got some retarder here. I'm just putting a little, that's what this clear stuff is. I'm just putting a little bit in my paint. It just makes it so it doesn't dry out so fast. So if you're like, what's she doing? What is that? That's what that is. It's nothing you need. It's just because when I talk and I tend to paint so much slower when I talk at the same time, which makes sense because I'm trying, you know, I'm using both sides of my brain here. And it's like, so my paint dries out so fast. So. Okay, so I'm going to start by just, and again, I didn't tape anything off here. I'm going to let this kind of be loose and whimsical today because that's just kind of the mood I'm in. I'm not, you know, I don't want to be super duper tight and particular here. So I'm just going to start by laying kind of a band of sky through here. And some of my trees are going to overlap that sky. So I want to bring that sky down further than I actually see it here because we want it to hit down to about here. So really it's like about half of your page you're gonna paint with some sky. So, and again, I don't, when I'm mixing colors, I don't need to worry about it being super duper perfect. I'm just gonna start by kind of brushing some of this blue into here. And keep in mind, when our paint is wet, it's gonna blend. The edges are gonna blend together, versus if it starts to dry out, you're gonna see a crisp edge. So you wanna work relatively quick when you're trying to put in this background or to blend this, but you can also layer it. If you find, oh, my first layer dried out, that's okay. You can always put another layer on. In fact, layers, of course, as I preach all the time, right? It's the key to making art. So don't worry if that first layer is not exactly what you want it to look like. And I'm just letting my edges be loose because I can always, sometimes with the canvas paper, I can cut my edges at the end. Sometimes I'll just trim them, or sometimes it's fun to leave them rough. And you can have fun with the sky too. It's like you don't need to make it exactly what it looks like on this picture either. By all means, it's like you can kind of create your own version of a sky too, and what you think looks nice. I feel very inspired by Bob Ross from the other day.
Oh, he would just be so happy.
Wouldn't he? He'd be like, look at that sky. He would, though.
He would.
Let me bring just a little bit lighter blue. And just kind of, if I move my brush kind of back and forth, and I'm using a wider angled brush, but any kind of flat like this could work. It doesn't even have to have that perfect shape. Something like this can work. I mean, whatever you have, but usually like wider brushes I try to use for this kind of stuff. And I can mix some of that lighter, the white, because you can mix actual paint together right on your page too. And again, I always think of sky. Skies aren't like perfectly blue. There isn't like a perfect fade all the time in the sky. Sometimes there are like abrupt shifts and changes. When I started like painting landscapes, I feel like that really made me pay attention to like what the sky actually looks like. And when you actually like look at it different times, it's like there's so many possibilities of what you can do, what the sky can actually look like. I'm gonna make this just a little bit darker for this corner. I do just wanna, that was actually lighter than what I had there. I do just wanna see some contrast there. There we go. Just kind of, again, back and forth between those edges is going to create kind of that soft transition, that soft blend. I'm going to take a little bit of a smaller brush now, and I'm just going to, if you notice the clouds, I mean, you kind of see there's a little bit of a shape that we kind of see, and it is pretty light right through here. So I'm going to kind of tap in some white. And if I just kind of tap, 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 I can just kind of soften that into the blue that's already here. So I'm not like doing brush strokes anymore, but I'm just kind of tapping, just kind of back and forth, all these different directions. And occasionally I might blot my brush off because it does pick up some of the blue of the background because that's all wet still. And then I can bring some more white in. And this is going to help me get some of that kind of lighter area that we see in the sky there. And again, tapping your brush off, you could put a little bit of water on it if you need to clean it, but I just take some paper towel. I even just show you, like I just kind of tap my brush off, go back and forth, and then pull some more paint and then bring that into here. And I just kind of work that in until I get it looking like I want it to. And if you feel like it's blending too much, you can always let the background dry just a little bit. Let's see, just a little bit more. So this, you know, kind of thinking about process, because as you kind of maybe apply the similar process to something else, like I always think about that sky. That's that background piece. So that's why I chose to paint that first. So now that I've got my sky in there and I've got some overlap, I know that like these trees are gonna come up over top of here, whereas it's gonna come down a little through here and then go back up through here. So actually I'm going to pull this down just a hair. This can come down just a little bit more. And then we can start putting some trees in there. I realized this didn't go down as far as I wanted it to for this side. And the ends, it's like you can just kind of let those, they don't need to look super nice because you're going to cover them with the trees anyway. Okay. So with the trees, if you look closely at them, we do see branches going through. And then we see, of course, lots of foliage, lots of leaves. We see greens, we see oranges, some kind of burnt orange to red, some yellows. And then, of course, we've got a lot of dark shadow kind of areas too. So my kind of approach would be this. And please know that the way I'm showing you, if you're like, oh, I'd rather do it this way, or I want to try this, please do. Like my way is not like the only way. And every single thing I paint, I approach differently anyway. It's like kind of depending on what I'm painting. But here's kind of where my mind goes. My mind goes to these dark kind of shadows first. Because if I put these dark shadows in first, like look at this corner over here. These dark shadows, these leaves sit on top of that, sit on top. It's gonna be a lot easier for me to kind of paint a shape, a dark shape like this in to these spots where I see it, and then pop these leaves on top versus doing the leaves and then trying to put dark around them. So that's kind of where my thought process goes, is and try to look at them for the shapes that they are. They're gonna be random, like free form shapes, but try to view these colors as shapes. And I'm gonna pop some shapes in for the darks. The other thing I'm gonna do is if you look closely at some of the kind of this major kind of tree here, we see branches and the trunk and different things kind of popping through. The other thing is leaves are layered on top of those. So I'm gonna start by putting in some pops of those in there too, to begin with, to give me like a structure to begin building the leaves from. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'll kind of walk you through that. And like I said, if you want to do something different, you can do something different. I'm gonna just switch this, give me a little bit more room. I'm going to take some of the burnt umber. And I didn't pull any black. So I could mix my own with ultramarine and burnt umber, will make black for me, or I could just put some black on my palette. It's really up to you. I think just for fun, because I didn't pull black, I'm gonna try just mixing my own black today with the burnt umber and the ultramarine, but feel free to do whatever you prefer. That's just going to give me, again, I like having the color in the black, I think is kind of nice. You could also mix a black with a dark green and a purple. And if you feel like it's not like black enough, you could always put like a little dab of actual black into it too. But for this particular landscape, I kind of like that. I've got some kind of blue in this black. I think that's nice. Okay, so I've kind of mixed out my black, which is more of a blue black, to be honest with you. And then I've got my my burnt umber. So those are my kind of two colors that I've got sitting out there right now. So what I'm going to do is just kind of, with this brush that I just kind of mixed with, I'm going to just kind of paint in some of these shapes a minute where I see them. And again, this may look a little funny, but keep in mind, this is that kind of background kind of shadow piece that we're putting in there ahead of time. And my kind of thought process is I still have to add some more classes for this week. So I think definitely I'll schedule a second session on this one. So we can come back to it. And if you want to come back to it, you can. Because I'm just thinking, I'm looking at time with it being about, with us having about a half hour left, I almost feel like I could spend some more time, but we'll see how you guys feel when we're done too for today.
I agree.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I like this already. It's just, it's like there's so much to do, and there's not much happening just yet.
Right. Yeah, because I don't want to rush it.
Exactly. My thought process too is I don't want to rush this. I think this can be a really neat painting. So cool. Yeah, I'll plan a second session for this week. Mix a little bit of the tartar in here. And then, I mean, really, as you look at this pathway too, this sort of fades to kind of the brownish anyway. So it's like you could mix some more burnt umber or whatever brown color you're using in there too if you wanted. And squinting is helpful at this one. Squinting has been helping me. If I look at it, put a little squint in my eye and then kind of look at it, I see the dark shapes. They pop out at me a little bit more. That's just what I'm doing. It's kind of like when Bob Ross painted like the shadows of the clouds first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do the same thing over on this side where I'm looking at this kind of shape. And again, if your shapes are kind of different than what's in the picture, who cares? Totally fine. And it's organic, it's natural. And I almost just sort of tap my brush too. Sometimes if there's a bigger area, like on the edges, I'll still do a brush stroke. But otherwise, I just kind of tap my brush a little bit because then my edges sort of are a little bit more natural and soft. And you can even paint some of the dark even where like light will end up covering it completely. This is kind of that process of like, you're almost like removing layers with your eyes and trying to imagine, well, what's under those leaves? What would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I don't know, like it's skills like that art teaches you of why I think it's like so important for everyone to take art classes. It's like your attention to detail and the way you start observing and seeing things like changes immensely when you start making art. Then I'm like,
yes,
just have everybody make art all the time.
Yeah. I think everybody would be a lot happier.
I think so. I've also kind of realized something lately that I think there's anytime, you know, people, okay, not anytime, I'm generalizing big time, but like it seems like these days, if you have a hobby or a skill, you have to try to figure out, well, how could I sell it or how could I make money from this thing? When it should just sometimes be a thing like for you to enjoy. You don't always have to like turn it into something else.
And I think, Susan, didn't you say something about that too?
Yeah, she was kind of talking about that last night, and that kind of popped in my head.
Yeah.
Oops, Susan, you're on mute.
Oh.
Okay, I want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's people who ask me, well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Like my friend who's building the railroad, it's not going to do anything except please him immensely.
Exactly. That's what it's going to do.
Yes.
Yeah. I may be getting carried away with my dark, but I think I'm on a mission. I think I know what I'm doing. So. My thought is I'm going to bring in a lot of this bright over.
It looks really interesting.
It does.
I'm here for it, so I'm gonna commit. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm seeing. Okay, let's do this. And I'm not gonna paint the dark every single, like, over everything, but this part especially, I was kind of like, okay, I like all this dark.
I printed this in black and white, and that helps.
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good idea. I didn't even think about that, to be honest with you, because I was like, oh, we're painting color. But that's a really good idea. I'm getting close to my next kind of color here. I think it's fun to play with different brushes too, you know, and like I said, the, you know, versus brush strokes, tapping, moving in different ways, light, heavy pressure. Start getting your favorites. I don't know, maybe you already have some favorite brushes. I sure do. Some of my ones I go back to. Okay, so I'm going to also at this stage put in a few of these branches. I know I kind of have a blob of
How do you do that?
but I'm going to start bringing some branches, and I'm just going to, my technique for that is I'm going to find one of my nice little skinny brushes. I like to put just a little bit of water on the bristles. And I'm going to take some of the burnt umber and then mix a little bit of my homemade black into it. So it's still a little bit more brown than anything, but it's just darkened a little bit. And then again, just a little bit, and I can, so sometimes I'll even sort of just practice on my palette paper, but if I have a little bit of water in this skinny brush, I can get, you know, those nice little lines, and I can sort of create, you know, little branches sort of coming up and those sort of shapes. So I am going to put like a few of those in. It won't be the end of them for sure. I'll come back to it, but I want to get like a few kind of started because they are underneath some of the foliage we see. And again, like where I'm putting them, I'm just kind of looking at the picture saying, okay, they kind of come up to Know about here. This doesn't need to look super duper perfect at this point because again, we're going to be layering the leaves. And I don't care if mine are exact to the picture, but I'll, you know, get the suggestion of them for sure. Lots of kind of layers of them. Let them overlap a little bit, some thick, some thin. You know, maybe there's some have a little bit more of the brown, some have a little bit more of the black. Although all the branches are pretty dark in this particular image. But to me, this is almost like where the kind of, instead of drawing, this is what's kind of going to help me lay out all the leaves and stuff. Again, I do not worry too much if these are perfect because lots of like portions of them will get covered up. These are just kind of, you know, I want to see bits of these popping through here. So this is kind of my start to that. This would be a funny one for me to, well, I mean, of course it's being filmed because, you know, we always film it, but it'd be funny to take photos of this one and watch the process.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it. I'm almost feeling like I'm painting in a way I've never painted before. It's kind of fun. And again, just random branches. See them through there. Let your brush trail off a little bit. Get some of those ones in the distance. This one be a little bit thicker. Kind of amazing, like truly how many branches like are in each tree, you know? It's like when you really start to look. Right. And even on the right too, I mean, we're seeing with this tree, we see a few little branches in there. So I might put a couple just to get me started. Again, it helps me know where to start to put the leaves. That structure. And again, I'm not like making mine super exact like the picture. I'm just kind of, if I see a branch, I'll just kind of loosely put one in a similar spot. I'm definitely not putting every single branch that I see, but maybe the more prominent ones or the ones I'm noticing. And to be honest, there's probably some more little spots of dark I could put in here too. As I'm putting branches and I'm noticing that. But again, we can come back to some of that too, because hopping around, you know, as we've talked about, we can totally do that. The other thing I'm just gonna kind of do along the bottom is just kind of bring in some kind of browns kind of along the bottom here. Again, more layer will go over top, but if you look kind of here, to me, this is sort of brownish. We do see some shadows and highlights very faintly on here, but just, I think, some nice brown. I'm going to actually take a little bit of white and then bring that brown into it, just lighten it a little. And again, this is just kind of like a base for this. It's not, you know, the final, what this is going to look like by any means, but this will. Yeah, this will be a fun one to see it all come together. Just like seeing the process start to unfold and it going from what the heck is this to oh my goodness, I'm seeing the leaves, I'm seeing the foliage, I'm seeing the depth. And again, color is one of those things. It's like you can, you know, spend time and try to make colors look identical, or just kind of also do your own thing a little bit, which, especially when you have a printed picture, we talked about that, but it's like the print isn't always accurate color-wise to what it looks like on your screen anyway, so. It's been interesting. Color's an interesting thing to me because I never stress too much about color. I'm always comfortable with, I'll just make it my own. That's always been my thing. But I'll have students that get so stressed if they cannot get a color exactly right. So it's like, I think it's so much of who you are and your personality of what you're good with or what you're doing. Okay. Well, I am going to, while this is kind of starting to dry a little bit, I'm going to start putting just a little bit of green on my palette. For some of the, kind of in the background, we see some kind of bits of the green. And again, they appear more in the background, which is why I want to put them in first. I like to try to, in this sense, work back to front. And we're not always going to work that way. I mean, we're going to hop back and forth a little bit, but again, that's why I put all this dark on here. That dark's not going to all show. It's going to recede. It's going to be in the background, and stuff is going to become sitting on top. So with my greens, I'm just putting out green, a little lemon yellow, and a little yellow oxide, so I can just do different variations of greens. Oops. There are a lot of different greens here. So again, this is that where I don't necessarily prescribe to an exact recipe, but I just kind of take little bits of this, little bits of this, till I make the, you know, kind of color I'm going for. I'm in there with brushes right now. I mean, really, I've got this kind of, it's like a medium brush, but it's kind of flared out a little bit. Probably didn't take the best care of it. It's a little bit older. So I am going to use this one and just kind of mix up some just different greens here on my palette. So some I mix a little bit more yellow into. Some of it's the green by itself. Maybe one's got a little bit more blue into it. I just gotta just have a little variety right here on my palette. And I'm gonna just kind of start. And if you wanna remember, a little bit of red will darken your green a little bit for you too. Make it not as bright if you need to tone it down a bit. A touch of red. I did put a touch of red in here. That's gonna help that recede for me. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of start to look at where I'm starting to see some green, pops of green in the background. And I'm just gonna, with my brush, kind of start tapping that in a little bit. Now, you may have to do layers here. You may have to mix a bit of white, just a teensy bit of white if you need to increase the opacity. So I definitely play with the different greens. And I just kind of start by bringing, and I'm just kind of tapping. You could try different brushes here. You could do sponges. I mean, whatever you think looks good. If you don't want to commit and try on here, you could try on a separate piece of paper first. But now kind of anywhere where I'm seeing some bits of green, I'm just going to kind of start tapping them in where I see them. And I'm certainly not done with the branches, probably not done with all my darks yet either, but this is at least going to help me start kind of building up some of these layers that I'm seeing. And of course, my background layers, they can be a little bit more soft, less detailed, but you could certainly try different paint brushes to get different effects. Sometimes I even take like a little skinnier brush and kind of, maybe bring out some of the ends a little bit. So the middle is more kind of brought together, but then I can flare out some of the little ends of the trees, branches. You can even put just a touch of water on your brush so they sort of soften. But, I just try to pay attention. What do the outside edges of the trees look like too? That's definitely part of it. But you can move things around, you can add trees, you can, all sorts of possibilities. I think this green to me just sort of makes sense, kind of getting it put into all these background spots. You could certainly add more branches at any point. Continually playing with color, adding a little bit more brown into the green, a little bit more red. You could add a little bit of black into it. Sometimes I try some bigger brushes in the back, and then I'll kind of take some smaller brushes and layer a different similar color over top. That kind of helps create depth. But really, I mean, for the next bit here, really, I probably won't move past the green in the time we have left today. I'll probably just kind of spend some time looking closely at the background greens. Like there's a little bit right here. There's some back in here, all through here. And I'm just gonna start to kind of tap that in. But of course, if you want to, hop to a different color and start working with a different color, you totally can. Yeah, I think this is a fun experimentational painting as far as trying different layering methods or different paintbrushes or application of the paint. I think that's all fun stuff to try with this particular one. Because no matter what, it's going to look like, it's going to look like foliage. I think when we're done, I think that part is nice. I mean, whether it looks identical to the picture is another thing, but as always, we don't need it to. So, and I'll probably even take an even skinnier brush and bring out some little branches later, but I'll just kind of do that later. Now, if you see some actual leaf shapes, like what I'm doing right here is I'm just kind of taking my brush and moving it in different directions to maybe mimic some of the like bigger leaf shapes that we're maybe seeing over here. I'm just exaggerating them a little bit. I don't know, this one could take a few sessions, to be honest. It's lots and lots of depth and layering, but I think it's fun. To be honest, it's like when I pick a reference picture, it's like I look at it and I'll kind of assess it, but until I like get in there and start painting it too, I don't fully know how difficult it's going to be or the exact approach. But the nice thing about I think the way we all paint and what we do is that we can make it our own. If something is, oh, that's kind of challenging, maybe I don't want to do it that way, you could try it a different way. This is, I always, again, approach it kind of like a puzzle, or you're building up all these layers. And again, I just, want to stress that it does not need to look beautiful the whole time. That is a ton of pressure. It can, you can allow it to be in progress. And I say that because that's something I had to get over myself, and I think when you make art and you have maybe someone who comes and looks at it and they don't really make art, they expect it to, oh, it should look beautiful right away all the time. And it's like, well, no. I've got to develop that and build up the layers to that, and think about what's underneath everything else. That's why too, I think, the appreciation you get for other art after you start making more of your own too. That was something I really noticed when I'd go visit galleries and I look at things that capture my attention and I'm just like, wow, how did they make that? Or like, what, how long did that take? Or what was their process? I just think that's so interesting to think about. And so I'm just even bringing some of my greens kind of into here because, again, when we look at all these layers, we see dark, we see green. They're all building on top. And no, mine doesn't look too much like the picture yet, but that's okay. A big thing is once we start to get all the oranges and stuff into here, that's going to be a big kind of transformative part. That's so much of the image. But, I just think my brain, it makes sense to, okay, well, what's underneath? Let's get that in first and build it up to what's on top. My kind of thought process is, to be honest with you, I almost feel like a couple more hours could be spent on this.
Yes.
How do you all feel about your painting? Are you all invested and you want to kind of take a couple more? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
So
I do.
perfect. Great. Me too. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to schedule probably 2 more sessions for this one.
Good.
Because I just think probably 1 session to kind of get a lot of what we're seeing with the foliage, and then a final session for kind of fine tuning